Sawadee Krap. Welcome to the Network for the Development of Agricultural Cooperatives in Asia and the Pacific. NEDAC was started in 1991 by UNFAO, ICA, UNILO on the recommendations of 1990 ICA Regional Conference of Cooperative Ministers. Memberships of NEDAC can be from Asia, the Pacific, and its wider associated regions. NEDAC members can be from anywhere in the world. While regions activities on NEDAC include trainings, seminars, workshops, study, research for the promotions of agriculture and aligned sector cooperatives. NEDAC Training Center Bangkok during different classroom and online programs. NEDAC website is www.nedac.info. Please visit, subscribe, and like our official NEDAC YouTube channel. Thank you. Sawadee Krap. I'm Joy Maintain. I'm a consultant in Network for the Development of Agricultural Cooperatives in Asia and the Pacific. Welcome to NEDAC's videos. I present special videos on International Senior Leader Residential Training Programs conducted at Bangkok by NEDAC Training Center in 2019. Our website is www.nedac.info. You can enjoy videos on NEDAC official YouTube channel or on Facebook NEDACHO. Best wishes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mishra. As Mr. Mishra introduced, my name is Yukitsugu Yanoma. I'm a policy officer in Socio-Economic Development and the Public Policy Support Group in the regional office based in Bangkok of FAO. So, well, good morning, first of all. I didn't have a chance to meet all of you. I hope you are enjoying your stay in Bangkok, and welcome to Bangkok in Thailand. I hope this whole your stay will be productive and so on. But I want you to. It might be a good idea for you to sort of walk around and visit as many places as possible. For example, I suggest visiting like supermarket because you will see the major changes in the country of Thailand, and it's probably you can learn something and bring it back to India. Since many of you, all of you from India, it's been about 5 years since I joined FAO. So prior to FAO, I was working in the private sector. And I did all kinds of, I worked in various sectors from natural gas, renewable energy, and agribusiness. And, my relation to India also goes back about 20 years. I visited so many places in India. As a FAO person, also I was, I spent a whole month when I was young, traveling around throughout India. And so as a businessman, also as a FAO person, as a policy officer, I spend a lot of time in India nowadays. So I think I know a little bit about India, but so I try to focus on a more Indian perspective as much as possible. And I have about 40 slides. I try to go as slow as possible. I might skip a little early, but I will share the slides with you later. So if you don't catch it on this event, maybe you can take this home and you can reread. And since this session is quite long, so I might finish a little early. And maybe we open up later, we discuss, based on my presentation, maybe we can discuss what India is facing and what sort of we should worry about for small farmers and what kind of a trend do we see, not only in Asia Pacific, but also globally. So let me start by describing last 5 years or so, we start hearing this word megatrend. All the management consultancy firms, global consultancy companies, they write a report on the global trend. There are so many global trends trending right now around throughout the world, but I gotta focus on the 5 mega trends, which is more relevant to agriculture and food sector. Can you see in the back? Is that? Well, I'm gonna share this slide later, so I try to explain as much as possible. Also, before I get into agribusiness per se, I gotta focus on the global trends. What's happening in the world, and what will happen for the next 10, 20, 30 years. I start by describing socio-demographic changes, followed by urbanization. I will talk about new economic power balance changes, technological advancements, and of course the climate change. We cannot talk about anything without climate change nowadays, and it's directly affecting farmers. Okay, so let me start by talking about socio-demographic changes. You've probably been hearing the population growth so many times from newspaper, TV stations, and so on. And since goes back to 18th century, we started talking about population growth, and there was a major concern about population growth. Back in the 18th century, we worry about maybe population is growing so much, but agricultural productivity growth maybe not catching up. So we worry about maybe population is we humans will die with the starvations and so on. But actually it didn't happen due to technological changes, advancements, and so on. But population growth is still here. We have to face this issue. So let me tell you a little fact. At each minute, we have about 145 newborn babies every minute in this world, still. And back in the 1980, when I was a child, we had a 4.4 billion populations in this world. A few years ago, in 2015, we had a 7.3 billion people. But by 2050, we're going to have nearly 10 billion people. We're going to continue to see the growth until about 2050. And after that, we're going to start seeing a little bit of a decline in population growth. But until then, we're going to have population growth. And that's the fact, and that's what we have to face. So that's a global story. But when we look at each sort of a different regions and country, it becomes a very uneven sort of growth we see in this world. Basically, 2 regions in the world, we see a huge population growth. One is in Africa. We're going to see a double of population in Africa by 2050. India is probably will see about 2.15 billion people in 2050. China, of course, is the largest population group in the world. And the whole Asia, we see a huge growth. Yeah, please come forward. Please welcome. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see from the back. So for some of you who cannot see, this is India. This is non-China, non-India Asia, and we see Africa. So after we see in 2050, the Africans as a group, we see the largest population in this world. On the other hand, we see a declining of certain groups. So,
Okay.
Okay, is it better?
Okay.
Better? Okay. So the countries in the diagram, these are the Asian and African countries. We see majority of population in 2050, basically mostly Asians and Africans. But on the other hand, on the right-hand side, we see a slight increase of the population in the US and Canada and Latin America. But when you look at the Europe, we see a declining population in Europe. When you look at each individual country, my country, Japan, we lose about 15% of population by 2050. Germany, similar way. Russia is 16%. Italy, more or less the same. But on the other hand, we see a huge increase of Indonesian and India. So in China, due to their policy, we see a slight decline of population, but we still see a 14% increase of population by 2050. Okay. When we talk about demography and when we talk about the population, we probably, many of you remember from school that we always talk about population pyramid. So this is a pyramid. This used to be a pyramid from 1950. We have a clear pyramid shape age profile of the population. But when you look at the red line, that's the age profile of 2,100. About 80 years from now, we see a completely different structural age profile changes. So in the back in the old days, we see a pyramid of the population. So we have a lot of young people at the bottom, but people didn't live long enough. So by the age of 80, almost you didn't see any population existing. But about 80 years from now, all the populations, we have a similar large number of population up to 60 years old. We still see a large proportion of our population existing, living up to 80, 90s, or even up to 100 years old. So this is the sort of age structure we are expecting to see in the near future, 80 years from now, which is not that long from now. So there is a correlation between the population and the number of population and the GDP. So, for example, a country like India, you see a lot of increase of a GDP, and that's highly correlated with the population growth, or absolute number of population. So in 2050, I'm talking about globally here, global GDP will increase by 2.5. We see almost a double GDP in 2050. And per capita income will increase by 1.8. So that means a lot of so-called developing countries, they are increasing their purchasing power. They're becoming average populations become more wealthy. They have the power to purchase so many different goods. And the gap between the so-called developing country and developed country is getting shorter and smaller, right? So that's something that we're gonna expect it to see. And GDP per capita will grow about 2.2% per year globally, on average. But when it comes to India, it's probably higher number because you're doing excellent job in terms of economic growth. But the population is also growing. But this growth of income is going to slow down after 2050. So let me go back to this previous slide. We see this sort of like a tomato-shaped population age profile. But eventually, the population growth is going to slow down. So what's going to happen is
Sir, shall I ask one question?
Okay.
Sir, how that negative population growth in your Japan, is it because of that single child norms, or what is that reason why that negative growth of
Okay, let me
population?
talk about a little bit of Japan, but I'm talking about this globally first. So I don't want to scare you, but what's going to happen. So eventually the people become wealthy. The age the woman have a baby is much later and later. It's growing, right? So we, per household, we see less children. So eventually, after 2100, we see probably a reduction of this proportion of the population. So this is gonna shrink. So we see less young people, but we see more old people. That's exactly what's happening in Japan right now, as you rightly pointed out. Is that a big problem? Well, sort of. We have a problem, huge problem in Japan right now. Large proportion of population is about 60 years old, but we have less and less young people. And what's happening is that for medical care, government is supposed to provide the government care, right? But who's paying for those money to cover these medical costs? The young people, the working age population, they are contributing every year due to tax and so on. They are increasing. So, but a small number of people have to give a large population of aged people or old people who can no longer work. So the large number of population and the old people, they have to rely on the smaller number of young people. And that's a huge burden for young people. Exactly what we're facing right now in Japan. So the country like India probably, it's not an immediate issue because we see this for a while, this kind of age structure. But after that, we start declining population of young people. But we see a huge number of old people. So that's a big concern still. Okay, so demographical change I described, that's one of the major mega trends happening still in the world. The second issue is urbanization. We see more and more people settle in urban areas. According to some statistics, we will have about 70% of the population who are going to live in urban areas by 2050. When you look at each country, different regions and so on, it's already a large proportion of the country, the population live in urban areas. For example, in the USA and Canada, by 2050, about 90% of the population live in urban areas. And Europe is the same way, 82% by 2050. The trend is quite similar in so-called developing countries. India, we see relatively less urban population in India. So 2010, we had about 31% of the population who live in the city. But by 2050, about half of the population live in the urban area. And China, about 80%. Remaining Asia, about 60%. But this trend seems like it's continuing. So what does it mean? We have fewer farmers, but the demand is in the city goes up. So as a farmer, you have to grow more in order to feed people in urban areas. So that's the sort of scenario we might see in the near future. So urban area, so according to some survey, the 700 biggest cities account for about 57% of the global GDP. And so by 2030, the number increased slightly. About 60% of the wealth are concentrated in the urban areas. It's already, trend is happening, and it's going to get worse and worse. I don't say worse, but it's going to be more and more concentration of wealth in urban areas. By 2030, we see 220 million additional middle-class consumers. You probably see that in a country like India. You know, you have a bigger city like a Delhi, Mumbai, and so on, Chennai, and so on, but you also have a secondary cities popping up. I recently visited Bangkok. Some of you are from Odisha. You know, it's getting bigger and bigger still. So the concentration of a population in another area, and along with it, the wealth will be concentrated among these people who live in urban areas. So by 2030, 60% of the total global spending takes place in urban areas. So a lot of economic interactions in urban areas. It's a little bit going back a little bit, but socio-demographic. This is still a socio-demographic issues. One of the trends also we see is that people becoming more mobile. So number of people working away from countries of origin increased by 25% in the last decade. I have a condo in Tokyo, and this area, I have a condo, is well known for Little India, you know, eastern part of Tokyo. We see a lot of Gujaratis actually migrated to Tokyo, and they actually are working in the Japanese companies and so on, right? And when you go a little bit north from what I live in Tokyo, we see a lot of Kerala. So there's a little bit pockets of communities popping up throughout the world. So even a relatively more homogeneous country like Japan, a lot of people are migrating to Japan and also other places as well. So cross-cultural mobility is taking place, but because of that, you know, also the recipient countries, they sometimes complain about it. So immigration is a big issue in the US. In Europe, it's a very political issue. It determines who wins in the government. So it's great that everybody is becoming mobile, but at the same time, there's a conflict we might see in the future as well. So what's happening for what we eat and the way we eat and so on? As a farmers, we see a lot of population growth. We still see a large number of population growth, and people tend to live in our areas. But what's the sort of effects in the sort of nutritional issue? Well, we're going to see a huge increase in demand for food. And the kilocalorie amount of people what consume will increase. So in 2000, the global average of kilocalorie per day was 2,800, about 2,800 kilocalories per day. By 2050, we see about 3,100 kilocalories per day. So people consuming more. And not only the calorie, but also we see more protein increase, consumption, fat increase, intake will probably increase similarly. And that means we have to increase the food production by 50% in 2050, right? So population is growing, but these population growth taking place in the urban areas. So in the rural areas, we see a decline of people. So that means also farmers are declining, right? But they have to feed, these farmers have to feed increasing population in the urban areas and so on. So they have to rely on urban population, people who live outside of the farms or rural areas. They have to rely on more concentrated, reduced number of farmers. We see a huge changes in diet right now. Every single day I hear news about diet changes, diet programs. So what's happening in the world is we see more people consuming more animal proteins, oil crops, and sugar. People are really consuming these products. As people become wealthy, people tend to eat more of animal proteins. They spend more money on the oil crops. So it's great, it's a diversification of a diet that's happening. But at the same time, we see a different changes of pattern, and due to that change, we see a new type of disease taking place, like obesity is a huge issue globally right now. So, and also when people move to urban areas, people demand ready-to-eat food. So people spend more time in the supermarket buying food from the supermarket. And traditionally, maybe the woman and wife cooked at home, but because of their working outside, they don't have time to cook. So this ready-to-eat food is becoming popular, not just in India, but also globally. People tend to eat out more. Thailand, for example, when you walk around the city at night, you see all the people, so many people, even the Monday night tonight, people eating outside. And there are so many variety of restaurants, so many types of restaurants, more options out there, but people tend to eat more away from home. This is a bit hard to see in the back, but basically this is a comparison between the sources of food from plant-based and also animal-based diet. As you can see, the animal, well, still plant-based food is dominant on this forum, but we see an increase of animal-based food is increasing dramatically globally. And what's happening is also people becoming wealthy, people live in urban areas, and the people become so picky what they eat. So people are more concerned about health issues and safety. Food safety becomes so important. People even talk about animal welfare. Right? People just don't eat any meat. People prefer meat raised in a sort of a proper environmental friendly way. When you go to a grocery store in Thailand, in a fancy grocery store here, eggs, for example, you see so many varieties of eggs. Some of them organic, some of them even the label stating also this chicken is raised in a very environmentally friendly way. People pay more for premium for this, but still the demand is there. And some consumers prefer any food grown in a more social responsible way. It's great. And the consumers more concerned about environmental issues. So the people becoming more wealthy, and the people have so many options of food to buy or consume, but also they become very picky eaters. So the demand driven. So this is when I was a businessman, I was told by many people that in agriculture specifically is a very demand driven sector. So when you look at the value chain of agriculture, from production to the consumers are always the king. They decide what they buy. The supermarkets procure the sources to meet the demands of the consumers. So ultimately, the consumers have to determine what they're demanding, and the producers have to provide that. They're becoming more and more, even in a country like India, people become more picky. I know a lot of consumers in our areas in Mumbai, they talk about food more, socially, environmentally responsible way. They're willing to pay the price for that, for those products. So this transformation is not taking place in Europe and the US or Japan. It's happening all over the world. When you see a supermarket in Thailand, in Bangkok, you see it. So many different types of products. So that's not just only taking place in the rich country, but also taking place all over the place. Okay, now I'm shifting to a different type of trend. Macroeconomic issue. By 2050, your country, India, is probably the second biggest economy in the world. It's probably China is probably still leading, but you surpass US, well, you surpass Japan soon. I'm talking about global GDP right now. So this is a graph for 2030. India is the third biggest, but by 2050, probably India has become the second biggest economy in the world. Emerging economies, as I mentioned before, the gap between a rich country and a poor country is getting smaller and smaller. And you see a major emerging economies growing. But this week, we have a G20 meeting taking place in Japan. Well, a significant member of the G20s are from emerging, so-called emerging market, like India. So we probably see the Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, Russia, Turkey. These are we call the emerging seven. These are become a powerhouse of agri-food industry, agriculture. Right? So there's so much concentration of agriculture in these major big countries in emerging market. Also, you're gonna have a competition soon. The country, we call it F7 countries. The frontier market. Bangladesh, neighbor of yours, Colombia, Philippines, Morocco, Nigeria, Peru, and Vietnam. They are becoming a new powerhouse in agriculture. They're becoming very competitive in agribusiness world. For example, Vietnam is now the second biggest coffee exporter. 20, 30 years ago, maybe they are insignificant, but they are trying to invest in a huge amount of money and efforts and resources. So you see a lot of specializations of countries focusing on certain commodities. They're leading the market share in certain commodities. That's what's happening globally. So it's great. India becomes the second biggest economy. Right? So, and when we see urbanization, population growth, and so on, you probably notice from where you're from, the huge investments happening in the infrastructure, right? I recently visited Vijayawada in Andhra Pradesh. They're creating new capital near that, right?
Amravati.
So that's a huge investment. It's incredible, and it's going really quickly. So physical distance getting smaller and smaller. In India, you have a great, excellent domestic flight. So from Mumbai to Delhi, it's so easy, so many flights every day. Highways are getting improved better and better. So that car transportation, logistics becomes much better. Train system is probably improving soon. So we see in 2012 about $4 trillion of investments in the infrastructure. And we see in 2025 about $9 trillion, more than double. And guess what? 60% of those investments are taking place in Asia. So Asia is booming in the infrastructure as well. Continuing the new changes to the new power balance, we see a huge foreign direct investments in agribusiness and agriculture. So India is opening up to international investment also. It's a relatively conservative country in terms of foreigners coming to India. It's very difficult country to penetrate. You have a strong domestic market already. But still, India is opening up for the foreign investments. So we saw about $2 billion of foreign direct investment in 2014-2015. That could be a threat and could be an opportunity. I will talk about that later. Agricultural trade is becoming more and more prevalent. You see more products coming from different countries. You also see different products in Indian products in the different countries. So total agriculture exports from the emerging markets. So agricultural trade between emerging markets and the developing countries. More than 60% of these agricultural trades are among developing countries. And along with the agricultural foreign direct investment, Also, we see a huge booming of processing sector as well. And we see, for example, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Turkey. These are the major superpower in processing sector. Move on to technological advances. You probably hear more on this issue. It's really changing dramatically every day. So in agriculture, it's no exception. The technological advancement is taking place. So at the farming, at the general level, for example, ICT, information technology, communication technology, smartphone, cell phone, whatever you have, people tend to use that more and more in agriculture. And the primary production, we hear more about biotech technologies and climate adaptation technologies, new seeds and so on, as popping up. Even the processing sector, so a lot of changes happening. We have a robotics, now robots producing agricultural, doing the farming in certain countries, like my country, Japan. We don't grow lettuce anymore in the farm. We grow lettuce in the factory. And who's doing that? It's a robot. It's a very controlled environment. So I don't know about so much about Thailand at this moment, but probably you eat salad in the morning and afternoon or lunchtime or dinner. Well, some of these lettuce might not come from the farm. It's actually come from factory. It's true. We have a 3D food printing technologies taking place. And also diversification into different sectors as well. For example, recently I helped Thai government to design the project. So they're interested in doing something pineapple. So when you hear Thai pineapple, we assume that the people, the demand that comes from actually eating the pineapple. But no, they don't care about pineapple. They care about enzyme extracted from the skin of the pineapple that used in the medical and the pharmaceutical industry. That's what they're interested in. So they're moving forward. Country like Thailand, they're really strong competitive advantage in agriculture. But not only in agriculture, but they're shifting into different sectors as well. Medical, pharmaceutical industry, education is quite there already. Distribution marketing, also technology is coming in. You probably heard the cold chains and so on. Satellite controlled logistics system, that's already taking place in so many countries. So I want to describe, I was picking this sort of what kind of technology is out there right now. Along with the value chain, I listed certain key technological changes. So in the procurement side, pre-production and financing technologies, we also see the seeds and the seedlings, the genetically modified breeding species is available. Machinery, we have a new machine. For example, there's a machine I recently read. I think it's in Japan or Netherlands. The humans are not operating machines anymore. So there's a computer-controlled machines. They are doing tilling in the soils and so on. It's already happening. Materials, we have a very sort of different materials. Material industry is growing very fast. For example, we concluded an ASEAN meeting this weekend. They talked about how they can reduce plastics, straws, and so on. Well, they are thinking about replacement already by something else. Water irrigation technology is also very quickly improving. And also we see a new types of financing. We talk about financing. We used to agricultural cooperative banks, and it's a very significant, still play a key role. But we have a very different type of financing, how to access to finance. For example, crowdfunding Have you heard this term? So people just using a website, trying to procure financing from all over the world. So any sort of innovation is happening even at pre-production time stage. At the production, you see more quick changes. Artificial intelligence is coming to agriculture. We, as I mentioned, we have plant factory already, especially in Japan and the Netherlands. We have a limited land, so we have to control environment. So they actually growing tomatoes and so on in the factory. Internet of Things, IoT, you probably heard this term. It's already penetrated in agriculture. Circular economy, so not just the food industry, agriculture is not about food, but also used in the biofuels, bioplastics, and applications, as I mentioned, pharmaceutical industries, so application is quite prevalent. Robotics, robots actually doing farming more. Sensory technology, there's actually sensory technology existing. So what they do is drone, for example, drone sort of capturing your field. They know exactly the contents of soil moisture, water contents, and nitrogen, and so on. They can just detect detail percentages. So they can tell by using the sensory technology, you can tell what sort of a land you have and what's needed. Because so for example, nitrogen, if the nitrogen is missing in the field, it's quickly the satellite and drone pictures, you can tell what's happening in your nitrogen contents in your soil. We have that technology already. Still expensive, but it's happening. And we see a lot of corporatization of agriculture. We see more and more big companies coming into farms, and they do actual production also. So what we see is we see also outsourcing of the farming. So the big companies invest in the money, but they use farmers to produce on behalf of the large company. Water saving technologies is already dropping. In the processing logistics also we see a lot of changes and we see new technologies. As I mentioned, new application of agriculture in pharmaceutical and cosmetic industry. Photocatalyst, you probably, it's not really familiar term maybe, but we have a new type of, we're creating basically the sunlight artificially and trying to use that in agriculture. That technology is happening. Refrigeration technology is improving more and more. And it's not about the technology, but also GI, for example, global indicator, geographic indicators. Agriculture is becoming more specific, and people becoming more branding oriented. So if you want, in Thailand, in certain areas, people prefer rice from certain areas. And as I mentioned before, the consumer is becoming more demanding, more picky, and they buy only food from a certified food or the environmentally friendly food and so on. But people, so the branding is becoming more and more important in agriculture. Packaging materials, it's becoming it's changing. And so on and so on. So in the retail sector, we see more supermarket. We see new style of marketing and outlet. We use internet to consume. So for example, in India, you have, if you are hungry at night, you can just internet, you buy all the food and deliver it to you within a half an hour. So that's sort of a new change we see more and more. Anyway, so these are just examples of a technology, what's happening globally along the line of the value chain. So technical advances at the farm level, I'm going to go into a little detail. So, for example, the big data application in the agriculture sector is already here, as I mentioned. So the farm level information analysis, including soil, water yields, weather forecast, and so on. Now we are really developed the technologies that we can tell precisely. Precision agriculture is becoming more and more popular. 20 years ago, it was impossible. It was too expensive, but the technology is becoming cheaper and cheaper. We use this technology applied in the farm. Smart agriculture machinery, using drones, becoming really popular. So agriculture is already the largest user of a drone in the world today. And new technologies to optimize water usage, soil sensors monitoring, they monitor humidity contents, and also the technologies here. At the distributional level, big data applications in the retail. So people keep a track of what kind of food you consume. Consumers tend to buy or prefer. Maybe sooner or later, we have a thing, technology can detect. So the rice produced in Odisha, maybe people can tell that people prefer a certain way of certain rice products from Odisha. And you can detect what sort of a consumer is willing to pay for certain products because this technology makes it possible to keep a track of consumer preferences. Logistics and so on, the track technology is improving. Also, the cold chain is used extensively in Asia. So it's a smart of everything now. Smart payments, smart storage, smart truck, smart everything. So smart technology is already here. And in India, as a competitive advantage, you developed IT technologies quite extensively. And so applications, it's already there, but also becoming more and more prevalent. Okay, the last mega change, climate change. As you probably heard, the climate change is affecting agriculture. It's a major change. We hear this every day in the news, the media. So there's a growing pressure on agri-food industries. So environmental concern is really becoming important. But due to the environmental climate changes, we see more public policies intervening in agriculture. You see more regulations and consumer responsiveness due to climate change. So, for example, we see a tendency of a reduced and optimized use of fertilizers and pesticides and any chemicals in agriculture. And also as we hear more and more every day that we have to reduce the waste and the residue and the recycling and also different applications of agriculture in different sectors such as bioenergy. Water availability for agriculture production and processing is also a major concern due to climate change. We have more volatilities of temperatures and rainfall, and it's very hard to predict what's going to happen in the next few years. Historical memories or historical information becomes meaningless because every day is changing. So anyway, climate change is a major issue. So far, I've been describing these 5 key mega trends and changes globally. But what's going to happen to agriculture and agribusiness? Right? So we talked about population income growth, the socio-demographic changes, urbanizations, and due to the urbanization, people's preference for food is changing, so their diet is changing. Economic power dynamics is changing. We have a smaller gap now. We cannot say rich country or poor country anymore because everybody's becoming wealthier. Technology is growing really quickly, and the climate change, we have to live with it for a while. So what's going to affect these mega trends in the global changes in agro-industry? Well, we see more and more of trade liberalization and agricultural trade is becoming more and more. Because some countries, like Japan, for example, we have only 2% of our population doing farming. It's reduced more and more. We have to get food from somewhere else. So maybe we're going to trade with you guys and in India, right? But it's not just between Japan or India, but it's happening all over the place. The global agricultural trade is taking place and increasing. But because of that increase, the politicians and the policymakers are more concerned about continuation of globalization. So, for example, recently, U.S.-China relationship, that's sort of a reaction toward trade liberalization. And agriculture is no exception. It's a very huge effects in agriculture sector. We see institutional governance changes, policy making is also changes, but also we see more vertical coordination. Large companies coming into different countries, they try to invest, they try to control the farming system in different countries. Property rights is ongoing issues. Technological changes, we have to adapt to these technological changes. It's a competition. Unfortunately, some people growing very well in some other places, they can grow better food. Maybe some people are left out if you are not adapting the new technology. So agribusiness in developing countries, the whole global trends and the effects in agribusiness is already happening. As I mentioned repeatedly, it's taking place in emerging market or developing countries. So you see a huge concentration of power in agribusiness industry. When you look at this, we have only 10 countries, but look how many companies they own. These are the food, processed food. These are the primary food. These large companies controlling. They buy different companies more and more. Look at this. For example, there's some company you're probably familiar with. Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola owns this many companies. Used to be independent companies, but because they're so powerful, they start buying, acquire different companies. Unilever has big presence in India. Look at how they become, they're really huge, right? But it's happening more and more. You see a more concentration, consolidation in other business models. So this is a sort of a reality right now. So I mentioned about the foreign direct investment. When you look at the primary sector agriculture investment, it's increasing, but less dramatic. It's increasing, but compared with secondary processing industry foreign direct investment, it's growing so dramatically. This is a reality we are facing right now. So we see more changes in the composition of products and sectors. People more producing the horticultural products. Right? People produce more processed products. Retail distribution is becoming more and more important. They are driving force. Supermarket comes in. So we see more non-traditional way of buying food. A lot of people in India buy food from a kirana shop, right? Well, that's changing. It's slow in India. It's the kirana shop. It's doing well, but these giants or the supermarkets and so on are start coming in more and more in India. It's more in China. You see so many different foreign-owned supermarkets in China. Right? India's case is still not, so many foreign companies trying to do. But they came and they kind of failed. But that pressure is always there, still continuing. So internationalization of the markets and ownership. So companies in India, it's a foreign company. They do intervene in the agricultural sector and the food sector, but its ownership is in someone else. But also, India is doing doing the similar thing in other countries as well. Some Indian companies investing in the palm oil industry in Indonesia. So I don't know if that's true, but it's the other way around is also happening as well. So when we see more big power companies entering the agricultural market, so what's happening is that capital intensity is getting higher and higher. So we mentioned about one of the changes of the technology changes, right? But these are fancy technologies. It's not still cheap. So in order to use these new technologies, you have to invest a lot of money. So what's going to happen is that the more bigger power companies are investing in capital-intensive technologies and so on, it's becoming harder and harder for the smaller farmers to enter the similar market. That's a big concern. So China, for example, has promoted technological improvements in the scale of agro-processing plants. So their investment in capital-intense products, machineries and so on, between 2007 and 2011, increased from 26.3 to $84.3 billion. That's the investments taking place in China alone. So we see more increased use of a coordination control mechanism. So we looked at all the different consolidation of the companies. They're setting their own regulations and law, regulations and standards, so that everybody cannot imitate these standards anymore. Contract farming is already it's taking place all over the world. So that's the sort of reality we have to face, and we have to strategize how we cope with that kind of major trend. Okay, so mega trends, I kind of touched on the negative thing, but there are actually opportunities out there. So one of the opportunities that socio-demographic trends, we see a large number of population. We see a large number of population in the urban area. They don't do farming anymore. So demand is increasing, right? So there's a higher consumption power for growing population. It's taking place in a country like India. So we see more and more people consume more food, more fat, more animal protein, more calories. So they need to get that calorie increase from somewhere else. So it's, in that sense, it's a great opportunity for farmers to produce something, and consumers are there. We see more diversified mobile workforce. So I don't know about India at this point, but in Japan's case, the people born in the western part of Japan, but they're doing farming in the eastern part of Japan. That's capable. And also, they migrate to a different country and they do farming in a different country, like the Mexicans in California, for example. That's becoming more and more. So as a farmer, if you cannot be successful in one area, there's a possibility maybe shifting to different places and do the farming in different places. And the more populations, like as I mentioned, is more concentrated in urban areas, and they don't do farming. They're moving away from farming, so they need to buy food from somewhere else. The balance of power is changing. India is becoming wealthy, and the business world is the same way. So there's a great opportunity for farmers or companies. They move into different countries and they do the farming in different countries and so on, right? So there's new opportunities. But also you see a different type of, like as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, you see a different type of, the age structure is changing, right? So when the age structure changes, the way they demand, the consumer demand is also changing. For example, in Japan, we have a majority of old people. So every time we produce food, make sure that those food are consumed by old people. We cannot produce the junk food all the time because old people don't prefer junk food. They cannot eat the junk food anymore. So very sort of a specific markets emerging in different places around the world. So in China, for example, you see more value-added products, processed products is becoming very popular and spend a lot of money on this. But it's not the same in Japan. Japan, all the age, all the populations consuming something more healthier, more easier to eat. So new opportunities in agro industries. We have more technologies developed. If you can access to it, you can take advantage of applying adopting and processing technology and so on. So as people become more wealthy and urban people, as I mentioned before, the people becoming picky, and they specialize the food that they consume. So the different markets emerge. Certain people prefer very cheap egg, but on some other end, some people really prefer very expensive, environmentally friendly chickens and so on. So you see a different type of consumers emerging, and farmers could differentiate their farming techniques and so on to meet the different demands. But at the same time, there are a lot of challenges in the industry as well, and India is no exception. So the changes happening really quickly, and adapting to these changes are quite difficult sometimes. And more and more there's a pressure from international communities about the women gender issues, environmental issues, dealing with immigrations and so on, issues. It's a demographic change in a sort of a challenging way. And some countries, as I mentioned this, it's a repeat. It's opportunity for the different type of consumers emerging, but at the same time, you have to really keep keep your ear on the market, what sort of things being demanded. If your targeting market is the young people, you have to produce something so that young people can eat. If you're trying to do business with Japan, you have to really think about old people, because they are the ultimate consumers and so on. So you have to sort of keep your antennas always open. What sort of things are demanded in different places? Even within India, there's such a diverse country like India. It's probably different markets, and the food industry is quite different. So many different types of consumers in India. But you have to meet these demands. Urbanization is opportunity, but at the same time, it's a very challenging issue. Feeding the cities requires, make sure they have to have a sufficient supply in terms of quantity. So city people, the population in the urban areas, they want to do business with the people, the farmers who can supply more in a sort of a stable way. And that could exclude the small farmers. So the companies tend to remove small producers from the supply chain providers who don't meet the expectation. We see a lot of foreign direct investment. It seems like maybe there's opportunities there, but if you cannot provide in a steady sort of manner in terms of supply, they might be excluded from this value chain. And also the farmers who wish to provide fresh produce to supermarket should also accept the daily delivery frequency. They demand a certain number of tons of certain products, and if you cannot meet that demand, they probably don't want to do business with you. So there's always pressure for the farming and supplier side. So as I mentioned this before, it's a great, economy is great and growing very rapidly. Urbanization is happening, and India is becoming a superpower in agribusiness and agriculture sector. But at the same time, you have to adapt to the market changes, because probably 10 years ago in India is a very different scenario than today. People globally tend to eat different things. or a different manner. Right? But you have to really keep your eye on these changes. Changes are happening, whether you like or not. Changes are happening, and you have to sort of adapt to these changes. So you have to keep eye on consumer preferences, and maybe seeking different opportunities, because there are diversified economy and also diversified economy in agriculture. Okay. Technology advances are great. It's excellent. It makes farming slightly much easier, maybe to some extent. But as I mentioned before, these new fancy technologies are only available for wealthy people or wealthy companies. There's a huge, becoming more and more, the capital intensity is becoming more in agriculture, but that's also very expensive to buy. So they're taking advantage, there's large companies could take advantage of smaller farmers because they can do fancy things with using fancy technologies. So there's a fear that agribusiness companies can be left behind if they are not able to access to these technologies. So technology is great, but at the same time, if you can afford or you can have access to it, might be a disadvantage that somebody else is taking advantage over that. Environmental concern, climate change is a big concern. As I mentioned before, it's a challenge, but we have to face it. And the farmers directly influencing the climate change and environmental issues. There is a pressure due to this climate change. Globally, there's a pressure to reduce food processing related to CO2 emission, and decrease the carbon footprint. So the consumers are demanding also more environmental friendly products. But at the same time, using technologies for the environmental friendly way, it's a very costly. So there's a sort of a pressure from both ends. The consumers, the pressure, and also the producer side, there's some kind of pressure to adopt these technologies. So environmental issues, big challenge, and we have to adapt to it. Alright, so coming to a conclusion and summary. So mega trends, I mentioned about 5 mega trends, and it's taking place every moment in this world. It's gonna affect agribusiness more globally. So on the demand side, my message is that food industry transformed by changes in diet, increased consumption of processed food, animal proteins, fats, and fruits and vegetables, and the growing urbanizations and other socio-demographic changes. That's demand side changes, right? And also the supply side, on the other hand, there is technological innovations in primary production, processing sector. Climate change is the major threat, challenges, given challenges. And this supply side, there's so many transformations taking place. Intermediate segments, processing, logistics, and storages that link both ends of the chain, the demand side and the supply side. They're deepening their processes to scale up. There's more concentration, the more vertical integration is taking place, as I mentioned before. And there are changing product mix. Consumers demand different things and so on. So intermediate segments is also a lot of changes, and the mega trend is influencing that. And we call so-called the supermarket revolutions taking place continuously, and it's changing in a very different way globally. So the modernization of our food systems is increasing. and it's becoming more competitive. Supermarkets enter in the market, and they try to control the food production side as well. So there's a more competitive market and try to take advantage of these production levels. Okay, so megatrends are affecting agribusiness and agriculture. So there's a need for constant adaptations to market changes. So even you are doing the farming, you have to really be aware of what's being demanded on the consumer side. No longer we have a world, we just producing somebody's gonna buy. Maybe that's not that easy anymore because people becoming more picky. There are environmental friendly conscious consumers there, more socially conscious consumers demanding something else. So, but we have to really keep an eye on these changes on the demand side. So farm producers, they need to adapt to new market circumstances. Technology, climate change friendly technology, we're going to talk about this afternoon. My colleague is coming to talk about that. And there are a lot of institutional changes, policy changes and so on. Agribusiness dynamics are changing farming practices around the world. We have to keep aware of changes. So how do we compete? We need to compete. We cannot avoid this. Unfortunately, we are living in a world where things are changing quite rapidly. So, as I mentioned so many times, please listen to markets, consumers particularly, and try to provide different responses to these demands. And technology advances in general, manufacturing, primary productions, creating opportunities, and please take advantage of that as much as possible. Because the competition is increasing. And different countries producing similar products, if they're using fancy technologies, you might lose the market competitiveness in agriculture. So please keep aware of these technological changes and maybe communicate to policymakers and so on about these changes. And make sure it's not going to be a threat to small farmers. And food safety, we talk about food safety tomorrow. My colleague is coming to talk about food safety. Please take it seriously because consumers demanding more and more about food safe food. So practicing agricultural farming system, keep aware the more environmental friendly or climate change friendly way of practice agriculture. Maybe that's about creating different opportunities for the consumer. Because consumers buying sort of preferring these products and so on. So that's all. So sorry for the long presentation, but I hope I sort of set the tone and give you the overview of what's happening. And more as the week goes on, as days goes by, more different specific topics, different people presenting different things. So, but thank you for listening for the attention. Maybe we can open up for a discussion or something. Yeah.
Open for.
I don't know. I can answer these questions because I'm facing these changes as well. So please, we can sort of discuss maybe about this issue.
Yes, Indian cooperative movement having long history, and Indian cooperatives are involving both forward and backward linkages in agriculture sector. But by looking global trends or by looking future, as to your point of view, where cooperatives should be more focused in the future, so the cooperative movement will take turn or will grow in India.
Sorry, I didn't catch that one. Is that a question?
No?
That you are posing a question?
Yeah, my question is that.
Do you think the microphone? Sorry.
So my question is that Indian cooperative movement having long history, they are involved in both forward and backward linkages. But by looking global trends, that Indian cooperative should have, where they should have more focus. so that movement will grow on the upward side?
It's a very tough question. I don't have an answer. But I don't know. I want to ask you a question also. This you see a lot of you see a lot of changes. Do you feel the changes every day in your daily practices? Do you? Yeah. Okay. And well, one of the advantages of being cooperative is that you have a numbers. You have a large group of small farmers get together. As an individual, maybe you have a less power, but because of accumulation of concentration of farmers in one area, you create more bargaining power, and that's a very important thing. Yeah. So.
I feel that for cooperatives, looking at the changing scenario as presented by you, we need to go in for more of that ultimate marketing area, because that is what we can do. Because the farmers are slowly giving up their lands because they are facing many problems like water issues, and they are not able to supply to the supply chains in a constant way, and that procurement operations that are also not taking place properly. So these farmers are going to face a lot of problems because they are not able to produce the produce that the market requires. Because mostly people are requiring finished products which can be really taken to the table immediately, which is not available and which is being offered by the supermarkets of today. So basically the cooperatives, I don't know how long we will be able to help the farmers in this regard. So this is a big issue, and the only thing is we can think of what cooperatives can do is also enter into the supermarket area where they are able to get the supply from the real producers or who are like farmer producer companies which will be doing specialized production of certain commodities. Because now the trend is going for one product farmer, not different type of products. So that way also the cooperatives will not be able to help the small farmers now.
Any other question over there? Maybe we can sort of share the information that we discussed.
So, first of all, thank you so much. It was a great content to gauge over the upcoming trends in agribusiness. If I think with a little different perspective, so this has really, kind of increased concern towards the business at the end of the day. We talked about the opportunities which are lying with a more mature population, maybe the marketers and the consumers. But from a cooperative perspective, again, building up these trends which are related to the bottom line of the farmers, as rightly explained by the chief guest also, that ultimately it's gonna be a gap wherein I could see a pyramid, farmers at the bottom and marketers and consumers on the top of the scale. All those processing industries, things and opportunities, technological advancements, market upgrades, urbanization. So that is one side of the story. So, but at the end of the day, bottom line is gonna be hit badly. In the present situation, if we'll talk about India as a country, and if we'll compare it with the advanced economies, most of the advanced economies, and the difference between those two economies is, say, the average land size of an Indian farmer, it is less than 2 acres. If we'll compare it with UK or US, maybe they're about 10 acres. So the economy difference. Secondly, when it comes to the government side, in the present scenario, there have been a lot of things which comes as a support in form of subsidies to the farmers to run over the situation, right? But it's not going to be a final solution till the time we are not empowering farmers. They will be self-capable, like in the advanced economies, and using best of the best technologies. So the only thing which I have not been able to make out, that how farmers are going to sustain in years to come. So on the production side, it is good, it's growing, but at the end of the day, on the farmer side, it's going to be a major concern in days to come for the developing countries. So any solution which we can take away from this session, like how cooperatives can get on those sites wherein the strength can really be put up in that channel, because I could not get into that at present, at least.
I'm kind of curious. For example, I live in Thailand. This is my 5th year in Thailand. The way that consumers buying different food is really changing, right? So the more and more different types of food become available, and the people are more concerned about nutrition and so on. So, for example, when you go to the supermarket in Thailand, maybe 5 years ago it was not existent before. So maybe farmers trying to adopt and create new type of products because they sense some kind of a trend changing in the consumer. Maybe they read some books talk about different type of nutritional issues and so on. India, for example, diabetes is a huge issue, right? So the health concern is becoming more and more. So I don't know, but my question is that do you see a consumer changes, consumption patterns is changing in India?
Yes, of course.
And to meet these changes, is there any way so the changing, sort of adapting to a sort of a different way?
Yeah, changes are there. If we see that a lot of FPOs are coming into picture, that's just because of one of the reasons that maybe a marginal farmer could not be able to better sustain in this environment. So let's come together. So there are a lot of good things which are happening, but the kind of pace which we expect in another few years, and the kind of population we have to empower with, so that's a little gap which one may be a little worried of as a countryman.
Sorry, I don't really have a right answer to it. Well, is it easy to differentiate? For example, you've been traditionally growing, I don't know what kind of type of products do your members produce. What do you produce?
So there are a lot of FPOs which are working in different directions, right from getting into the consolidated efforts into maybe vegetable mandi, farming things, household items. So there are a lot of things. Secondly, as far as agri efforts are concerned, I can speak without this mic, sir. Yeah. So when it comes to the processing industry, maybe at the end of the day, it is managing the supply chains, right? Whatsoever. So processing industry is growing like anything. I'm sure that there have been a lot of FPOs which will be linked with those supply chains. So just to categorize with, maybe some kind of spices they must be dealing in some time. Maybe rice, or there can be a lot of things. So the point is only that how we can strengthen them, how we can improve the bottom line so that it will be a balanced supply chain in days to come.
What do you see the major issue in terms of So, for example, when you look at the value chain, what do you see most problem or challenges in your case?
So in my case, I see a challenge being a farmer of India.
Okay.
If I'll look from that perspective,
Uh-huh.
I'm not that much empowered to see a simple calculation, inputs and output market linkages. So I'm talking from an input side.
Okay.
Being a farmer, from an input side, if I need irrigation facilities, maybe technological advancements, financial assistance, being a margin farmer and looking at these scenarios in days to come, so I may really be a little worried how I'm going to make out on that or how I'm going to deliver on that scale. So that's my question.
See, basically, sir, looking at the changing food habits, a person, a small farmer who may be producing a lot of pumpkins, may be producing, but that pumpkin is not required by the ultimate customer. The ultimate customer in the supermarket, he needs a product which is ready to eat. So that gap is not able to do because he's a small farmer, he cannot process. He has to give it to some other person, sell it in mandi or somewhere, and then it has to reach a higher level. By the time the product is already spoiled. Because farmer, the ultimate consumer, he also wants to know from where the product has come, whether it is eco-friendly, whether it has been produced on a moral side, everything is all right. Those things, the small farmer in the field is not able to take care of.
Another best example could be like the practices in organic farming. They need a lot of certifications, a lot of education, a lot of awareness. I think at present even the farmers are not really aware how it can be a standardized practice to get an organic product into a market. Though marketers and consumers are really aware of it. That to be a little.
But do you see a huge demand in organic farming?
In days to come, it's gonna make a change.
Okay, it's already happening.
Yeah, it is there. It is happening. There are a lot of states which are coming up with different.
So
missions.
demand is sort of you project maybe demand is gonna increase, but in order to meet the demand, it's still a big challenge in farming.
So the primary question is who is gonna produce, how it's gonna produce.
Right.
So if everything is gonna get over to the urbanization, technological, mature audience, who is gonna work at the bottom line with how much sufficiency to all the capacities to perform. So that's a basic question of mine.
So Ryan, what state are you from?
Uh,
A state.
State. So I belong to Uttar Pradesh. That's one of the biggest state of.
Okay, UP.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the UP government,
Yeah.
are they doing something to help small farmers like you?
Not only UP government. If I talk about India as a perspective, there have been a lot of steps which has been done. Say state of MP, UP, all the state governments are doing a lot of things, and central government being so what do I say, a little positive side towards the farmers. They are also taking a lot of steps. But I personally think that subsidies at the end of the day are not going to make out for a longer term sustainability.
Right.
So anything which are going to be thought of or think of by FAO on those grounds for developing countries, that how they can come out from that subsidy situations and empowering farmers. That I was really keen to know.
Right.
So the problem with India is, actually, if you look at the bigger picture, the transition that has been made in last couple of decades, we were basically an agrarian economy, and the transition that took place, we moved too fast to the service sector without adding too much to our manufacturing, because the agriculture has to be backed up, seeing the growing population and growing demand. The agriculture has to be backed up with manufacturing as well and processing as well. The transition that took place in last couple of 3 decades, that we moved too fast to the service sector because of lots of money involved in
Right.
service sector. So there, not too much of importance was given to that manufacturing sector, and that's why there are most of the farmers are at subsistence level only. They are not gainfully employed. If the transition would have been properly done, they would have gained employment in manufacturing sector. Because there are not so many of farmers required actually. There are so many of farmers. 50% of population is farmers. If you look at the other economy, only 10% or 2% of the community is doing whole lot of, and the majority of them are involved in manufacturing. So the transition that took place is a little bit too fast for the Indian.
Okay.
We move too fast to the
Right.
service.
But the farmers sort of a
We are
disadvantage.
filling up the gap. Manufacturing is coming up. Agriculture is being given, processing industry is coming up. But I think we move too fast to the service sector because without giving proper weightage to the manufacturing.
Any other issues?
What would be the role of farmers, especially marginal farmers, in the case of we are adopting that contract farming? What would be the role of the marginal and the small farmers? Is there be any impact that they become sort of idle farmers in the case of we are adopting contract farming?
From my limited experience in India, I don't see many. I didn't come across many contract farming in India. I see more in different countries, like Thailand, for example, and plantation in the northeastern part of Thailand, for example, and make fruits and so on. But do you see a contract farming is more and more becoming popular in India, or you don't see much, you don't hear much?
In some places in Punjab,
Very limited to specific.
very limited. And unless we go for such innovative things, we cannot sustain that what we are doing with the present farming culture. We have to move forward with this kind of development.
So whatever is happening, that may be my view and how I'm looking at. Like it's more of a business view, even if the contract farming is happening. So until and unless some strong FPOs are not in place, I'm sure that the businessman at the end of the day, he has the negotiating power. Even the farmers are gonna connect with the contract farming. Now come to the technology side, sir, the other perspective. We talked about like enough data is being placed within 4 or 5 years. Now days have come for artificial intelligence, drone technologies, and there have been companies in India who are working for it. But what is their work at present is the big houses, business houses. If they wanted some tractor companies there, they want to go for any survey.
Yeah.
So they hire those companies. That how much gonna be the demand this year. So, but again, when it comes to the farmer side, because all those are costly affairs. A farmer cannot afford that. What experiment I could do with the technology in terms of gauging on the right patterns of the crop. So maybe in days to come, we can think positive and say that farmers are ultimately gonna benefit once the technology and innovation cost recovered and things become a part of the consumption, routine consumption and all.
Right.
But at present, it looks really different. So I could see a lot of development on the business side, the consumer and marketing side, but yes, farmer is being still a concern. So,
How many people in your organization? How many farmers do you deal with?
so I am from NEFIT, that's a body which is National Agricultural Cooperative
Oh,
Marketing
okay.
Federation.
Okay.
So we act as a central nodal agency for a lot of procurement operations which are related to pulses. Pulses. Yeah.
So do you provide sort of a technical assistance to the farmers?
Yes.
Nationally?
We have a network with a lot of cooperative societies
Okay.
through which we work under a 3-tier structure for the procurement process.
Okay.
So we do the national buffer stocking of pulses for India
Right.
on behalf of the government. So we get to the farmers through our network only.
So if farmers wants to sort of understand sort of a new trend of agriculture or new sort of marketing issues and so on, where the farmers needs a help from? I mean, where can they get the help from? Do you think your organization could help?
So it could be a partial answer, sir. For example, when it comes to the procurement as a task, there have been technological advancements which has created more transparency, more ease towards the farmers, more awareness towards the farmers. There were certain practices which were recently induced, like we have made the system little online. Whatever the offline things are happening, farmer taking his lot to a mandi and getting it through that entire process, and there is a dashboard and a messages going to the farmers what time he can bring his lot and things. So yes, to some extent. But yes, from the government side, minimum support prices are decided. So whenever the prices rule below that MSP, so we get into the picture, and there is impact on the overall on-ground situation. When we get to buy in mandi, so certainly there is a kind of a lift in the prices which can be seen. Ultimately, which is going to benefit the farmers at the end of the day.
Right.
So in some of the situations we can intervene and do, but again, question remains the same. In long-term sustainability, how we are going to empower the farmer.
Right.
All of us are playing our role to the best of our capacities. Maybe NCDC, maybe NAFED, and a lot of bodies which are working in favor of farmers.
Yeah.
But it's just a help to do situation,
Right.
not a permanent solution.
Right. So, well, in India's case, it's a very unique. You have a huge population of farmers,
Yes.
right? And my impression is that all the the farmers, it's the type of products they produce, the species and so on, is a very not very diversified yet. For example, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, at least 60% of the farmers produce rice, paddy.
Right.
Right. But my question is that can we move away from rice? Can we do something more diversified into like fruits and vegetables and so on? Right.
There are lots of other things in Andhra Pradesh like chilies and all. So people are growing multiple spices, plantation crops, apart from regular seasonal crops.
So you're trying to differentiate from other farmers, and also you're challenging the new sort of a sector in the area.
In fact, in front of the new agricultural technologies, as Sir was telling, there was a AT and E-NAM portal was
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is electric online auctioning of the grains.
National Agriculture Market, that's an online
Okay.
creating
So,
e-mandis and all.
right. So somebody else is creating new technologies out there. You kind of go
It has
into
already
that.
been done by the government.
It's
Right.
mostly a government effort, sir. Actually, the effort should have come from those companies which are procuring things from the farmer. Because if the government does, it's mostly a philanthropy.
Right.
Because government is not getting anything from
Okay.
out of it. If it would have been done by the companies, those who are procuring the things from the farmer, that would have been much better mechanism in the market, because they would have been getting better produce for what they are giving a better technology to the farmer.
Okay.
But most of the efforts are being done from the government side. That's the problem.
So the government created this sort of
Government is
channel.
doing it to tide over some tragic situations where the farmers are facing some problems. So, because nobody is preparing or some middlemen are involved, and then the final produce, the farmer is not able to sell. At that time, they are interfering.
Right.
Whereas this should have been a voluntary process or by something which should have taken place naturally. That's not happening. The e-mandis and all are not functioning. It functions only when there is a crisis.
Okay.
So that's the problem.
So in your case, are you representing a farm cooperative?
I'm also part of National Cooperative.
Oh, you're also the same.
Which is a funding body for cooperatives.
Okay.
For SEDPS.
Okay. So, but you witness some groups, farming groups, that they are kind of challenging new things. Why? I'm curious. Why they challenge themselves into sort of differentiating themselves and challenging new things? The government supported them, or sort of a completely sort of their initiative?
Government support is there, but the farmers, marginal farmers which are present in India, they may not even have an access to computer to know about this online mandis, and they need a hand-holding support, maybe from your organization, maybe from a private organization,
Right.
to learn to sell their produce in a particular time to get the best prices. They
Okay.
do not have the logistics support, since we were talking about logistics.
Right.
Then sir, you were talking about agriculture trends like genetically modified crops. But sir, people do not have that much financial assistance to avail seeds, because HY
lack of circulation of technology, information technology. That information technology, adoption of information technology in the farm sector is very less in India. So this, first of all, we have to address that information, passing on the information to the farmers. That's a basic requirement, what I feel. But some farmer may be cultivating rice, but the rice price may crash down. So that preemptive intervention with the information technology is must in the case of the agrarian crisis.
So you have numerous agricultural cooperative groups. You mentioned about SPFPOs and so on. What's the sort of a main purpose of these agricultural cooperatives? Are they just helping try to do the marketing, or just trying to just grouping together so that they have a little bit more
So the
marketing?
basic objective of any of the cooperatives are they just have to protect the farmers' interest at the end of the day. The farmers should not get exploited from any of the middlemen or traders in practices.
How do they protect?
Yes, that's a valid question. So, for example, if I say that there is X commodity, right, and the prices for that commodity has abruptly gone up. So, what government does in that case, they tell us to act, or any of the other parallel body to act and get into the market, and maybe I can mellow down that situation for the welfare of farmer and a normal public out there, who is the consumer at the end. Just to put you a more relevance in this case, say, take an example of a pulse. So if there was a scenario 4 or 5 years back, arar dal in India, it has gone up, I think maybe near about 200 rupees a kg, right? So at that point in time, government decided to create a national buffer of pulses, so that in case of any crisis situation, we can have a systematic release in the market, right? So all these operations which are related to price controls, hygiene issues which are relating to the price, the government intervenes. And obviously, whenever there will be such kind of situations, farmers would also get affected and exploited by the middlemen and traders. They dominate the terms.
Sir, I feel that all these issues of overproduction, less low production, is all happening because of our lack of policy. Yes, we do not have a national productivity plan. We are not telling, see, the farmer what he does, last year we had this high price. Okay, then all the farmers will go in for a particular, and there is a crash. So, whereas the subsidy pattern, everything is not limited. We should say that this much amount of farmers only should produce this, and the subsidy will be limited to that. So, that type of a planning is not there at the national level.
Sir, in India, there is the cooperative structure is not driven by the market model. It is basically driven by the government model. Government organizes the cooperatives at the primary level in the way they want, in a homogeneous manner. And there is as you know, India is a very diverse country. The market is very diverse. One market in one state would not match the market in any other state for that matter. And there is a lot of control of government over the market dynamics, say fixing the price of the commodity at the retail side, fixing the input side, fixing the volumes of the procurements. So by these market mechanisms, government tries to control and influence the behavior of farmers. And farmers are driven by these kind of interventions of government rather than playing on the market model. So since an economy which is dependent so much driven by the inputs given by the government or policy control to this extent, so a lot of commodities and a lot of commodities have been facing this crisis in which farmers are doing business in a big way. Say sugar is one industry. Similarly, there have been crises in almost every other commodity year on year or season on season. So market is very different in India compared to other countries. I know that developed countries also provide a lot of subsidies, but these are primarily being given to processing industries, not being directly passed on to farmers. So in that way, India is still very different compared to other developing and developed nations.
Okay.
So India has more interesting facts. Coming to your question of that, thinking of that differentiation of product lines. So, what kind of a solution we can think of those lines, wherein the policy, some in a way or some other way favors that before a farmer go for a sowing, they announce minimum support price. So for if there are X, Y, Z, if a farmer knows that X commodity is gonna have a good MSP, so obviously there will be an overproduction situation in that X commodity, right? Which will further lead to market distortion. Again, we have to intervene for the price control.
It's a trend
So
now.
it's kind of a never-ending loop. So policy framework maybe, but at the same time, what else can be done?
No, that is what I said. You have MSP for each and every product. So then there will be no problem. Every farmer knows this is what I am going to
See,
say.
Government of India, it announces MSP for.
What if few products?
Sorry?
What if few
I can say 25 of the agriculture commodities, which includes these sugarcane and all, the coconuts and that also.
And these MSPs are national.
So yeah, it is nationally applicable minimum support price. So the farmer is assured on that price that if some crisis situation would happen, then government is surely gonna buy at this price.
Right.
So you are safe enough.
Right.
But that is also at the same point in time not covering the entire population. It covers, I think, only 25% of the total production.
Okay.
Sir, another thing is that what we are missing is we assume that farmers are only doing one business, that is one agricultural production. That is not the case in India. If it does one production per season, then it will be engaging in diversity of businesses in other seasons or other because it has to ultimately sustain. What we see is that this agri business is not profitable for the farmer, but he still sustains so that that is because he does other businesses as well. And cooperatives as a structure at primary level are basically agri-driven and agri-organized.
Right.
So they will be doing only one thing with the farmers, that is either procurement of one commodity and giving them credit and giving them some financial services. But apart from that, a lot of other things the same farmer will be doing. And in many cases where cooperatives are very strengthened in the states, so that farmer will be a member of different cooperatives, doing business differently.
So do you agree the policy is a major issue? The policy has to change. So national policy, because agriculture is a national.
It is very easy to even say that let's change the policies. But again, at the same point, at this point in time, it's kind of a relief to the farmer.
Yeah.
But it's not gonna make out in long term. That's for sure.
Because the reason that the government created this MSP is that so that they can sustain, they can sell to the higher prices. That's the
Yes. So that the traders would not exploit them in any of the crisis situations.
right. But do you agree with the eliminating these MSP? Do you think it's gonna?
At present, it is working, and somehow it is protecting. Yeah, it is.
So
somehow
it's
protecting the
important
interest of the farmers
to
also.
keep having this MSP.
Sorry.
It's important to keep.
Yeah, it's been
MSP
recently risen up to 1.5 times what it was earlier.
Okay. So it's actually helping. This
Yeah,
MSP is
at present
helping.
it is helping. There is no doubt about it.
Right. But you raised the issue of the problem is that
Empowering. How can we empower our farmers in a sustainable growth
Right.
model?
Right. So your question is how the farmers can have more bargaining power.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So you recently elected Modi again, right? Modi again.
Yes.
Is he sort of helping farmers?
Absolutely.
He's more pro.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Government
pro
policy is to that farmers should get 1.5% of their that
He is
input.
the man who has increased this number of MSP.
Like 1.5 times, even if you can do 2 times or 3 times. But how much MSP procurement you are doing? That's the question.
Yeah.
That's the question. We have raised the prices 1.5 times. That minimum support price for suppose paddy will be from rupees 14 to it will go to rupees 21. So, but you are not doing the procurement for all the farmers. You are doing only 10% of the procurement. So 90% of the farmers are not getting the benefit of that NSP policy.
So who gets this? Who's
So
the
he means to
2%?
say that the government has placed up a capping. So though they announce
Right.
MSP, but it's not that the entire crop in India is getting covered into it.
Right.
It's only 10%. Only 10-15% of population is, but the farmers are getting benefit of that.
And that too for a particular season. If you don't come within that season, you won't get it.
Oh,
Finish.
okay.
You will come in season.
Plus control of water.
So let me sum up. And I want to say India is basically an agro-oriented economy, concentration on agriculture. Our government policy is very sound and it helps the farmers. It helps the farmers. Not only this, and the government is also ensuring the crop and the farmers. And for distress sale to be restricted, government has various schemes, like for example, minimum support price. There are market intervention schemes so that if there is glut in the market, then the government will intervene. India is having many organizations working at the grassroots level. You might be knowing Indian Council of Agricultural Research. It is a research body and there are many Krishi Vigyan Kendras. Almost in each district there is a Krishi Vigyan Kendra. That means the technological advancement, it is going to the grassroots level. The innovation should go to the farmer at the grassroots. Three things we may focus, not because most of the farmers are small scale or marginal farmers. We should encourage contract farming, cooperative farming, and gradually we can divert from this chemical farming to organic farming. That also should be focused. And our economy and even world economy, it is a basically market-oriented economy. We should focus on market-oriented economy and produce. The cropping pattern should be based on the market-oriented economy. What we should produce? In many developing countries, they are guided to produce this crop, this, that crop, specific crop. If there is a bumper crop of rice, we should divert from rice to wheat. If there is a bumper crop of wheat, we can divert to some other crop. India is going on this direction. We are also badly affected by the climate change also. So optimally we are going in the right direction and we are developing our infrastructure. The government policies are suiting to our farmers. Our technology is gradually coming up in a larger scale and it is benefiting our farmers also. But the thing is that we will have to reduce more, we give more value to the farmers. We should go for value addition. Even today also around 20% even crops are being damaged. How to have proper inventory, proper storage and the marketing system, the market forces to play in a better way so that our farmers should get better value. The government is now focused that they should get at least 1.5 times of their input cost. That is assured these days also. So through the organization NAFED is the apex body of agricultural cooperative and it is doing among services all over India, procuring these crops output from them, from the farmers. Again also we'll have to keep a balance in production, marketing, domestic marketing and export marketing. There is a pull by the export market also. We'll have to keep a balance also because we need foreign exchange. So this is a factor. Rightly you have said, our trend is increasing and gradually we are having more focus on agriculture. It is a realization, not by India. Most of the developed countries, we cannot neglect agriculture. Because agriculture is the answer to many questions coming here. But it must be through the cooperative. Cooperatives in the group, it is a collection of farmers. So they should be focused, they must be empowered. I think this type of training program will help our participants to do their job at the grassroots level and to strengthen the cooperatives. And definitely once the knowledge is transferred, they can do wonders.
How are we doing with that?
I think there is no more questions. Now good discussions. I will request one of the participants to thank the honorable speaker. Please take a seat.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, I am very much privileged to be here for attending this kind of program. This is the first kind of program I am attending this international program on cooperatives for improving our leadership development. I thank the NEDAC authority for giving us the opportunity to participate in this program. I thank you very much, sir. Today's session is Agribusiness trends in Asia Pacific region. It is a very good session we had, sir. You brought the very vast knowledge on this topic regarding what are the mega trends and what are the challenges, what are the effects on mega trends, and what are the opportunities, and also what are the challenges we have to face these mega trends. Mostly India is a developing country, and in our country agriculture is main occupation, and also agriculture is our country is an agrarian country, as sir said, and previously all the speakers said. We have to focus on agriculture through cooperatives. Cooperative being it is an art of some kind of organization. We have to aggregate the farmers into pull up. We have to pull up the farmers and make them to raise to the occasion of bargaining power. They don't have the bargaining power. And in today's topic, sir, I would like to share some points. Asia being a position in the global food market, it tilts heavily towards demand due to its large population, which being main highest population countries, China and India. And with limited agricultural resources, with only 1/5 of the world's agricultural land, and the region hosts more than half of the global population. Because of this trend, in Asia Pacific, we see these mega trends has a lot of impact on the agriculture, and also Asia has achieved significant production improvements over last 50 years, what you have showed. But produce very low yields compared to most other regions, with depleting resources like water, irrigation, and also deteriorating of soil quality, and also inadequate logistic supports, and also technological innovations, lack of technological innovations in especially in our country. I came from Telangana state, sir. In our state, I am representing Telangana State Cooperative Bank. We are also changing to the new trend. We are introducing all the technological innovations into our bank, and we have given the RuPay KCC cards to the farmers, and we are linking all the small and marginal farmers to the bank linkage credit, and we are making them. And in our government, in our state, ENAM, that is what have discussed our earlier. ENAM is a portal where the farmers get the better bargaining price for their produce. So through ENAM, we have done a major market, means we have helped the farmers in linking the farmers to ENAM portals. That we are doing, and I would like to say that we have to change our trend, change our this thing. We have to change our mind. We have to means we have to adopt more technological innovations so that farmers can get the better price for their yields. I thank you very much for giving this opportunity, and I also thank you so much, sir, for giving this good subject on the agricultural trends in Asia Pacific. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So this is just an overview. So I presented so much information. I think the details of each topic